My brother's drunken antics at our rehearsal dinner turned what should have been a joyous occasion into a whirlwind of chaos and drama. I never anticipated that my mother-in-law would step in and reveal a shocking secret about him in front of everyone. The entire evening spiraled into a series of unexpected events, and while it was stressful, I found myself oddly entertained by the unfolding drama. As the night progressed, my brother, one of my groomsmen, became increasingly inebriated. During his speech, he began to make my fiancée the target of his jokes, crossing the line from light-hearted teasing to outright cruelty. I had always thought he would be supportive, and I was blindsided by his behavior. My fiancée, a genuinely kind and caring person, didn't deserve to be humiliated like that. I could see her discomfort growing, and it pained me to witness it. I wanted to intervene, but I was momentarily paralyzed by shock, unsure of how to address the situation without causing a scene. Just as I was about to make an awkward attempt at humor to diffuse the tension, something completely unexpected happened. My mother-in-law stood up, walked over to the microphone, and declared that she had had enough. She announced that she had been waiting for the right moment to speak up, and as she did, my fiancé urged her to stay quiet, insisting that my brother was just joking. I was utterly bewildered by the exchange. My mother-in-law, however, was undeterred. She turned to my fiancé and revealed that my brother had been trying to convince her family not to allow our marriage to happen since our engagement. My jaw dropped in disbelief. I had no idea any of this was going on. I glanced at my fiancé, who looked increasingly uncomfortable, as if she were privy to information I was not. My mother-in-law continued, explaining how my brother had drunkenly called my fiancé one night while she was visiting her family. He had made outrageous claims about me, suggesting that I would cheat on her because of a supposed history of infidelity. This was completely untrue. I had never cheated on anyone. It was shocking to hear that he had been spreading lies about me, trying to turn her against me. My fiancé had been so disturbed by his desperate attempts to manipulate her that she had hung up on him, but he continued to call, sobbing and insisting that she would be better off with him. It became clear that my brother had harbored feelings for her, which made the situation even more complicated. That night, my fiancé had struggled to sleep, and the next morning, she confided in her family about the ordeal. They felt it was crucial to inform me, but my brother had sent her a long text, begging her not to tell me, fearing it would lead to a confrontation. My fiancé was torn, and her family decided to keep the matter private to avoid conflict. I was frustrated to learn that they had chosen to protect my brother instead of being honest with me. I felt I had a right to know from the start, and if I had, I could have put a stop to his behavior before it escalated to this point. My mother-in-law's revelation left the room in stunned silence. The color drained from my brother's face, and he looked as if he wanted to vanish. She concluded her speech by expressing her pride in welcoming me into their family and her excitement for our future together. At that moment, my brother nearly bolted from the room, and my father followed him out. They returned about half an hour later, and it was evident that my brother had been crying. The rest of the evening was filled with an awkward tension. My father attempted to apologize to my fiancée on my brother's behalf, but she firmly told him that his behavior was unacceptable and that she wanted nothing to do with him. I felt torn between anger at my brother and sadness over the damage to our relationship. The next day, my brother tried to reach out to me, but I was not in the mood to engage. I told him that what he had done was unforgivable and that I needed time to process everything. He left in tears, and since then, we haven't spoken. I'm seriously considering uninviting him to my wedding. I don't care if he's genuinely remorseful. I don't want to be reminded of his actions every time I see him on what should be one of the happiest days of my life. It's hard to believe that my brother could behave so poorly. We've never been particularly close, but the fact that he was secretly trying to undermine my happiness feels like a betrayal. While I'm hurt and angry, I'm also relieved that the truth came to light. I'm grateful for my mother-in-law's intervention. Without her, my brother would have continued to make my fiancé's life miserable. As I reflect on the situation, I realize that I didn't expect my post. I never wanted to stir up drama in my family right before our wedding, especially since my fiancé and my brother rarely interacted. She thought it would be best to wait and see if he would eventually stop his behavior. After the rehearsal dinner, she did apologize for not speaking up sooner, but I reassured her that I wasn't upset with her at all. She's generally a shy and non-confrontational person, and the only one to blame in this situation is my brother. Since that night, my brother hasn't reached out to either of us. I'm filled with anger and embarrassment, knowing that my future in-laws are now aware of his immature antics. It's mortifying to think about how he acted in front of everyone. In an update, I can confirm that my brother is still a coward and hasn't made any effort to contact me. My fiancé and I have decided to uninvite him to the wedding. I called him to let him know, and he broke down in tears, apologizing profusely. I told him that this decision doesn't mean I'm cutting him out of my life entirely, but I need some space to process everything before we can mend our relationship. He was still sobbing when we hung up, and while I felt bad for him, I know that putting some distance between us is the right choice for now. I thought that would be the end of the drama, but reflecting on the events of the rehearsal dinner still stings. My brother's drunken behavior publicly humiliated my fiancé, and he never expected my mother-in-law to expose his shocking secret in front of everyone. That night turned into the most eventful day of my life, setting off a chain of chaotic events and drama. Despite the stress, I found myself oddly entertained by how everything unfolded. During his speech, my brother became increasingly mean-spirited, making my fiancé the target of his jokes. While light-hearted teasing is usually acceptable, he crossed the line, making everyone uncomfortable. I was at a loss for how to intervene without causing a scene. Just as I was about to make an awkward joke to diffuse the tension, my mother-in-law stood up and walked to the microphone. She cleared her throat and declared that she had had enough, stating that she had been waiting for the right moment to speak up. As she began to address the room, my fiancé urged her to stay quiet, insisting that my brother was just joking. I was completely confused by the exchange. My mother-in-law then revealed how my brother had tried to convince her family not to let my fiancé marry me multiple times since our engagement. I was stunned. I had no idea any of this was happening. I looked at my fiancé, who appeared increasingly uncomfortable, as if she knew something I didn't. My mother-in-law continued, explaining how my brother had drunkenly called my fiancé one night while she was visiting her family. He had made outrageous claims about me, suggesting that I would cheat on her because of a supposed history of infidelity. This was completely false. I had never cheated on anyone. It was shocking to hear that he had been spreading lies about me, trying to turn her against me. My fiancé had been so disturbed by his desperate attempts to manipulate her that she hung up on him, but he continued to call, sobbing and insisting that she would be better off with him. It became clear that my brother had feelings for her, which complicated everything further. That night, my fiancé struggled to sleep, and the next morning, she confided in her family about the ordeal. They felt it was crucial to inform me, but my brother sent her a long text, begging her not to tell me, fearing it would lead to a confrontation. My fiancé was torn, and her family decided to keep the matter private to avoid conflict. I was frustrated to learn that they had chosen to protect my brother instead of being honest with me. I felt I had a right to know from the start, and if I had, I could have put a stop to his behavior before it escalated to this point. My mother-in-law's revelation left the room in stunned silence. The color drained from my brother's face, and he looked as if he wanted to disappear. She concluded her speech by expressing her pride in welcoming me into their family and her excitement for our future together. At that moment, my brother nearly bolted from the room, and my father followed him out. They returned about half an hour later, and it was evident that my brother had been crying. The rest of the evening was filled with an awkward tension. My father attempted to apologize to my fiancé on my brother's behalf, but she firmly told him that his behavior was unacceptable and that she wanted nothing to do with him. I felt torn between anger at my brother and sadness over the damage to our relationship. The next day, my brother tried to reach out to me, but I was not in the mood to engage. It was as if he had been stuck in a rut, and my happiness only highlighted his own insecurities. I listened as he spoke, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me was still angry about how he had treated my fiancé, but another part of me felt a glimmer of hope that he was genuinely trying to change. He explained that his behavior at the rehearsal dinner was a culmination of his frustrations and feelings of inadequacy. He had been projecting his own issues onto me and my relationship, and he recognized how toxic that had been. It was a lot to process, but I appreciated his honesty. I could see that he was making an effort to take responsibility for his actions, which was a step in the right direction. After our conversation, I felt a sense of relief. It was clear that he was committed to working on himself, and while I wasn't ready to fully reconcile, I was open to the idea of rebuilding our relationship over time. I shared my thoughts with my wife, and she was supportive of my decision to take things slowly. She still needed time to heal from the hurt he had caused, and I respected that. In the months that followed, my brother continued to reach out, and we began to communicate more regularly. He would send me messages about his progress in therapy and how he was working on his personal goals. I could see that he was genuinely trying to improve himself, and it made me cautiously optimistic about the future of our relationship. As for my wife, she remained distant from him, which I understood. She had been deeply affected by his actions, and I didn't want to pressure her into anything she wasn't ready for. I assured her that I would always prioritize her feelings and that our relationship came first. I wanted her to feel safe and supported, especially after everything that had happened. Eventually, my brother suggested a family gathering, and I discussed it with my wife. She was hesitant but agreed to attend if we set clear boundaries. We decided that it would be a small gathering, just immediate family, and I would be there to support her. I wanted to ensure that she felt comfortable and that my brother understood the importance of respecting her space. The day of the gathering arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air. My brother was nervous, but he seemed determined to make amends. When we arrived, he greeted us with a warm smile and a sincere apology to my wife. She accepted it graciously, but I could tell that she was still processing her feelings. It was a small step, but it felt significant. Throughout the evening, my brother made an effort to engage with her in a respectful manner. He shared stories about his therapy journey and how he was working on becoming a better person. I could see my wife softening a bit, and it gave me hope that perhaps, in time, they could find a way to coexist peacefully. As the night went on, we laughed and reminisced about old family memories. It felt good to reconnect, even if it was just a small step forward. I knew that healing would take time, but I was grateful for the progress we had made. My brother's journey was far from over, but I was proud of him for taking the initiative to change. In the months that followed, we continued to navigate our new dynamic. My brother remained committed to his therapy, and I could see the positive changes in him. He was more present and engaged, and he seemed genuinely interested in rebuilding our relationship. While my wife still needed her space, I was hopeful that with time, she would come to see the changes in him as well. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that family dynamics can be incredibly complex. It's easy to let anger and resentment fester, but I learned that open communication and a willingness to change can pave the way for healing. I was grateful for the support of my wife and my mother, who had stood by me through the turmoil. As we moved forward, I remained committed to fostering a healthy relationship with my brother while ensuring that my wife felt valued and respected. It was a delicate balance, but I was determined to make it work. In the end, I hoped that we could all find a way to coexist as a family, learning from our past mistakes and growing together. My brother had felt stuck in his own life, and instead of confronting his issues, he fixated on my relationship. He convinced himself that if he could win my wife over, everything else would fall into place for him. Through therapy, he began to understand that his behavior stemmed from deep-seated insecurities and a fear of being left behind, rather than mere attraction or jealousy. He admitted that the drunken calls weren't just random acts of intoxication. He had been drinking to muster the courage to reach out, fully aware of what he was doing. This level of honesty was new for him and, honestly, refreshing. As for my father, the situation had become complicated. He was still barely speaking to me, but my mother mentioned that he was starting to show signs of realizing he had mishandled things. Last month, there was a family dinner at my aunt's house, and my father showed up, took one look at my wife and me, and left without saying a word. My mother was furious with him, leading to one of their biggest fights in years. The silver lining in all of this is that the situation has brought my mother and my wife closer together. They now meet for lunch every week, and my mother has become one of our strongest supporters. She's been trying to help my father understand the gravity of my brother's actions, but he remains stuck in a boys will be boys mentality, which is becoming increasingly difficult to tolerate. Despite all the family drama, my wife and I have been doing really well. If anything, this ordeal has made us stronger. We've started seeing a couples therapist not because we're having problems, but because we want to ensure we're processing all of this trauma in a healthy way. The therapist has been instrumental in helping us set boundaries with my family and communicate better about our feelings regarding the entire situation. An unexpected development has been my wife's sister, who witnessed the rehearsal dinner drama. She has become my closest confidant in the family, always checking in on us and making sure we're okay. She even started a family group chat without my brother and father, allowing us to share updates and photos without the tension that usually accompanies family interactions. As for my brother's future in our lives, I'm cautiously optimistic. The guy I met for coffee seemed genuinely remorseful and, more importantly, self-aware. He isn't asking for immediate forgiveness or trying to rush back into our lives. Instead, he's respecting our boundaries and focusing on his own growth. He's even started volunteering at a local crisis hotline, expressing a desire to help others who are struggling with similar issues. My wife knows about the coffee meeting and has been supportive but firm about her own boundaries. She's glad he's getting help and making progress, but she needs more time, possibly years, before she'll feel comfortable being in the same room with him. I completely understand and support her decision. Some trust, once broken, takes a long time to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. Last week, my brother sent us both a formal letter of apology. It was several pages long, acknowledging every inappropriate thing he had done, taking full responsibility without making excuses, and expressing genuine remorse. He concluded by saying he knows he can never undo the pain he caused but hopes that someday we might be able to build a new, healthier relationship based on respect and proper boundaries. When my wife read the letter, she cried, not because she was ready to forgive him, but because it was the first time she felt he truly understood the impact of his actions. We decided to keep the letter, not as a promise of reconciliation, but as a reminder that people can change if they're willing to do the work. For now, we're focusing on our own happiness and growth. We've bought a house in a new neighborhood, started new hobbies together, and are planning to start a family soon. Life is moving forward, and while the scars from what happened will always be there, they are no longer the open wounds they once were. I've learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about respect, boundaries, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do for a relationship is to give it space to either heal or fade away naturally. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my brother or my father, but I do know that I'm at peace with the decisions we've made. As my wife said the other day, sometimes a happy ending isn't about everyone coming together, it's about finding peace with the way things are. I couldn't agree more.